want to find out if there was ever life on Mars, or maybe there is life today. And so I can't say for sure whether or not it is true, but I don't think it's impossible, which is why I've dedicated my life to this.
This is Life's Tough, Explorers Are Tougher, and I'm your host, Richard Weiss. Scratch the surface of an explorer and you'll find an adventure and a great story. This show is about their tales. This podcast is a proud supporter of the Explorers Club and the EC50 Initiative, 50 people changing the world that the world needs to know about. For more information, go to explorers.org. There's a famous quote, "Men are from Mars and women are from Venus." But our guest today, planetary scientist Dr. Nina Lanza from Los Alamos, might disagree with that premise. Welcome to Life's Tough, but Explorers Are Tougher, Dr. Nina Lanza.
Thanks, Richard. I'm excited to be here.
Nina, how sick are you of hearing that quote or title of "Men are from Mars, women are from Venus"?
I mean, at this point, I can barely hear it, right? Because obviously Mars is one of my favorite planets, certainly, and I spend a lot of time there. So whatever people may say, it's not stopping me from going to Mars every day.
So Nina, before we start, I'm just going to tell the audience how we first met. So just indulge me in this moment. Okay,
Great.
our first meeting was in 1979. You were in my fraternity at Brown University. In fact, you were brought to my room. You were crying. I gave you a drink. You smiled. I held you in my arms and you fell asleep. And the funny thing about it is you don't even remember.
It happens all the time. What can I say?
So just before I start getting hate mail from people, Nina was about 2 months old. Her mother, my aunt, Sylvia Lanza, came to visit me at my fraternity at Brown University, and I have known Nina since. So before she was Dr. Nina Lanza, she was just Nina, the apple of both your mother and your father's eye.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks for reminding me of that. You're right, I don't remember, but I feel like there might be some photo documentation somewhere. So
I do have a
fingers
photo.
crossed we can find that.
So Nina, I know
Ooh.
that you, among all the things you love Mars. And you mentioned the word Mars, you light up. So let's just cut to the chase. Are we going to find life?
Well, of course, I don't know. And that's why I'm studying Mars. I really want to find out if there was ever life on Mars, or maybe there is life today. And so I can't say for sure whether or not it is true, but I don't think it's impossible, which is why I've dedicated my life to this.
So you have many titles, and we do speak at family functions, especially around Thanksgiving, Christmas. We do a family Zoom call, and so I'm having a hard time keeping track of titles and projects you're working on. So which project are you working on? And I think you have different titles on these projects, right?
Oh, I do. I mean, I work on a lot of different projects. They're all very similar in that they study different aspects of Mars for the most part. But one of my favorite projects is the project I've been working on the longest, which is the ChemCam instrument project, which is on the Curiosity Mars rover. It's there right now, operating as we speak. And on that project, I'm essentially just a scientist, which is totally great and awesome. And I've been that since 2006. So I've been on that project a long time.
And so take me through some of the things that you guys have discovered, because I know that for a scientist, there's the awesomeness of, small discoveries, but there's been quite a few things from the start to the finish. It's been considered probably one of the more successful Mars missions.
Absolutely. Oh, we've learned so much. I could talk your ear off about this. But, one of the biggest discoveries that we've made is just that there was a long-lasting lake of liquid water in our landing site, Gale Crater. And this water wasn't something that was very acidic. It was actually neutral. So if this lake had been on Earth, it absolutely would have been inhabited. We don't know if it was inhabited on Mars, but certainly it would have been habitable. So a place where life as we understand it could have existed.
Our mission is to empower the next generation of explorers. If you like this podcast, please recommend it to a friend and have them join the expedition. So, for the layperson who may not get as excited over finding water, right? Because, water and life are different things. What is it about that discovery? And I know even on the moon now, which was thought to be completely devoid of water, they're finding at least chemical signatures of it.
So you're right. Water isn't the same as life. And certainly, even though there's water on the moon, that water is not really accessible to life as we understand it. So you need more than just water, but it's one of those basic ingredients. So we also need certain environmental conditions, right? We need water to be able to be liquid. We also need organic molecules and materials. We tend to speak about it in terms of elements on my instrument. So we look for the what I call the ChinOps elements, so carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. These are these really important elements that we know make up the building blocks of life here on Earth. So we need to know that those are there on Mars as well, and they are. And even more excitingly, there's actually organic molecules that have been preserved in these lake sediments for millions of years. And so again, this is really exciting because it's one of the first times we've been able to really say, no, this place had everything that life needed.
Nina, I have to say I grin ear to ear when you speak, and I'll tell you why. And this is the God's honest truth. You are one of the most effective science communicators I've ever met, and I believe me, I know a lot of scientists. And so, what made you so effective in communicating stuff with enthusiasm? I've seen you speak to kids, lay people, and yet people come away from those conversations and are enthusiastic about your work. They might not completely understand it, but at some level, you're hitting them. So take me through the early Nina Lanza, the formative years. What got you excited about being a planetary scientist?
Oh, well, goodness, what is not exciting about being a planetary scientist? I have the greatest job ever. I feel like when I talk to people about my work, this is how I feel on the inside. This isn't an act. I'm just so excited to share. And I feel like I'm excited, and why wouldn't everyone be excited? And, I've always been interested in space and space exploration. When I was really young, my parents took me to many outreach events in our neighborhood. There's some pretty big schools in that area, and so they often have observatories where
You're from the Boston area, Cambridge, right?
that's right. I grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, and so yeah, there are many universities that have open observing, that they open up their observatories for the public, and my parents would take me there. And there's this one night in particular that really sticks with me because I think it really changed the course of my life. This was in 1987 when Halley's Comet was making a pass around the Earth. It was very, very close. And it's a short period comet, so it comes back once every about 76 years. So it's within a human lifespan. So people were really excited about it. My parents took me to an outreach event that had a lecture beforehand and then observing. And I will admit, I was pretty young. I didn't pay a lot of attention to that lecture, but I'll never forget what I felt when I went onto the roof and I looked through that telescope, and there is this comet. And this is a thing, this is a real thing. And I realized in that moment that space and the sky, it's not a dome, it's not a flat thing. It's actually three-dimensional space, and it's huge. And there's all these things out there. And we have barely begun to discover what actually is out in our universe. And to me, that was the most exciting question ever. What was out there? And I realized from that day forth that that's what I wanted to study. Now, of course, I didn't know how to do that. I was 7 years old. I didn't have a very good plan, but I knew that that was something that I couldn't let go of.
But you're sort of omitting one sort of critical factor in there. You say your parents took you to see Halley's Comet. It's a little different than most parents. Your father, Dr. Richard Lanza from MIT, is renowned. I mean, and I do not hide this fact myself. When people ask me the biggest influences on my life, I mention my father and your father. And your father also is a great communicator of science. So at 7 years old, your dad's already speaking to you in ways that other parents wouldn't know how to, in terms of every career, every vocation has a language in which they speak. and you heard the speak of scientists from the time you were in my frat room at Brown University.
Yeah, absolutely. I was so lucky to grow up in a science family. You point out, yeah, my dad is a professor, and he is incredibly enthusiastic about what he does too. I think that's what his driving motivation is, truly curiosity. And he always shared that with me. My mother, too, has a scientific background. And in fact, she has a degree in geology, which, of course, I thought was super lame until here I am now. 20 years later, I'm actually a geologist by training too. So, we would take these road trips and my mom would stop by some road cuts and point out some of those rocks to me. And, I was too cool for school then, but now that's what I do too. So it definitely runs in the family. So I was lucky, in that regard that I never thought that science was inaccessible or different than your everyday life. It's something that's all around you.
But you exude a confidence around scientists, and your father was telling me on the phone the other day that in I think it was in 1990 that two of his colleagues had won the Nobel Prize, a guy named Henry Kendall and Jerry Friedman, and you were just a little kid, and you would call them Jerry or Henry, whatever little kids call scientists. So you were around Nobel Prize winners at a very young age. So the idea of meeting other scientists wasn't so intimidating for you. You were just always around it.
Absolutely. Although, when you're a little kid, you don't really know what the Nobel Prize means. You just know that these are, your dad's friends and you've known them forever and they're really nice, right? Um, so I think though it has helped me as I move forward with my career to feel comfortable in knowing that I understand how science works. Now, that doesn't mean I'm the greatest scientist in the world or that I'm always right, but more that I understand the process, because above all else, science is a process. And it's okay to take some wrong turns. It's okay to ask questions. And sometimes the simplest questions are actually the most important ones. And so we should never be afraid to ask those questions. Because I think that can be intimidating. We're supposed to know everything sometimes. That's what we think as scientists, but we don't have to know everything. That's why we have jobs. We're trying to find the answers.
And you also have had other interests. A lot of the maybe preconceived notions about a scientist is it's a very nerdy person. They thick glasses. They only can understand that. You once performed in a goth band. Am I correct on
Oh
this?
my goodness.
You didn't think
Digging
I
in
knew
my
that one.
past.
What was the name of the band, first of all?
It was Incus, and they still exist, albeit without me, because I actually I moved away to answer the call of science. But they still are going strong. In fact, probably stronger than when I was there. But yes, so actually, one of my hobbies is singing. I'm a soprano, and so I'm a classical singer. So I sang for this band, and it was super fun. It was definitely, I would say, a stretch for me because you mentioned scientists are nerdy, and I felt called out a little bit here because those are my people. We're awkward and weird, and so maybe not the best match for a tribal arty goth band.
Yeah, but there is still a little bit of a disconnect in science, at least in some fields of science with women and scientists. I know in marine biology, whenever I see people, it seems to be as many women as men. But in planetary science and physics, it's overwhelmingly men. And I know this will embarrass you, but people used to compare you a lot with Anne Hathaway. You looked a lot like Anne Hathaway. So I could imagine this Anne Hathaway with a PhD walking into these meetings. You know, did you ever notice awkwardness from these people? Was there a problem being, quote, one of the guys?
Well, you point out some of the stats, right? Even planetary science certainly has more men than women, but we're not doing so badly, honestly. Like we're about 25%, I think, for the geosciences, but that's not 50-50, certainly. Yeah, I would say that, maybe it's less of my gender and more of my exuberance that was weird. I'll go into a room and try to find the fun in it. But, I have to say that my colleagues um, I think they appreciate me and what I bring to this team, even if it's a little bit non-traditional. I try to make sure that we're all enjoying our work, even as we're getting our work done. So, I'm very lucky in that regard. I have a very strong team.
So you mentioned the concept of team, and I know that team is very important to you. You had a team of people, for example, when you went to Antarctica to look for meteorites sitting on there. What is it that you look for in a team dynamic when you go on an expedition?
That's such a good question, because I think what people think is going to be good for a team ends up maybe not being as important as some other aspects. So when I was in Antarctica, I was living in an 8 foot by 8 foot tent with another person. And that was for 6 weeks. And we had 4 tents, so we had 8 people. And I think one of the things that I took away from that experience was that one of the most important aspects for doing an expedition is having a group of team members who are all willing to roll with the punches. We make plans and we try our best to figure out everything that could possibly go wrong. What are some mitigating strategies? But inevitably something else will happen. And we have to be relaxed enough to just go with it and find a solution and not be upset or holding on to our idea of what we were supposed to be doing or how we were going to be doing it. So I think for me, looking for team members who are going to be able to be adaptable and easygoing, those are really critical characteristics, I think, even more so than expertise, because you could teach somebody anything, right? But you can't help people deal with the emotional challenges of being in an extreme environment.
So you just received a grant from the Explorers Club to go up to Canada to study. Oh, I'll let you explain it. You have a expedition coming up to Canada. What is it that you're looking for up there?
Yeah, I'm so excited. So this is so exciting. So this is the GRAPE mission. So GRAPE is an acronym that I'm going to probably mess up, but that's the gamma ray
Ray analysis,
analysis
planetary
for
exploration.
planetary exploration. Yes, that's right. As you might imagine, we are primarily focusing our work on one technique, that's gamma ray spectroscopy. So maybe I'll back out a little bit though and say, so the place that we're going in the Canadian Arctic is Devon Island, and specifically to Gale Crater. Now, this is a great Mars analog location that's actually been studied quite a bit for many, many years. It's an impact structure. And so, of course, on Mars, there are many impact structures. But what's so great about the one at Houghton is that it's within a periglacial environment. So that's a permanently frozen place. And this is a really good analog to Mars environments, which are typically going to be frozen most of the year, if not the whole year. So that's why it's a great Mars analog. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to test this new type of gamma ray spectroscopy technique. So what is this gamma ray technology? You say, what we do is we shoot neutrons at rocks, and then those neutrons interact with all the rocks and all the material in those rocks, and then we look at the gamma rays that come back. And so we are trying to understand what the gamma ray signature is to be able to understand composition. So we're doing that in Houghton because it's really hard to simulate that environment in our laboratory. We've actually tried to do that. We've bought a ton of Mars soil, Mars regolith simulants, right? We have bags of dirt and we put water in it and stuff like that. But there's no substitute for being in that environment and doing tests. So our primary focus is to go and test this new gamma ray spectroscopy technique in a field environment.
That's exciting. Nina, we just have a few minutes left, and I'm just curious of some questions like, who is your science hero?
Oh, science hero, goodness. There's so many good choices. I mean, I would say I don't have a single one person that I look to, but there are many people that I aspire to be like in many ways. And, at the risk of sounding maybe a little bit corny, I would say, like you, my dad has been a real role model and mentor for me. Just the way that he approaches both science and life. I think he demonstrates really clearly that you can do great work and still, be a great person and treat people around you wonderfully and still be joyful. That to me is a really important lesson. And I think that's something that I can take to many aspects of my life. But as I move forward as a scientist, for me, that's what I look forward to continuing.
And I think you've done a great job. Nina, I'd like to thank you for coming on, because I think what you represent is that ideal of being a great scientist, a great person, and a great communicator. And God knows the world needs more of you. So thank you for being on Life's Tough, but Explorers Are Tougher. Maybe I can't wait till people say that you're their hero. So
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you. All I could say is that I hope that others can look to me and see themselves and their future. Anyone can do what I'm doing, and hopefully
well,
they'll do
I
it.
think you're being modest on that, but thank you nevertheless, Nina. So you were terrific.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast. Now we have a little favor to ask. We'd really appreciate your support, so make sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss another episode. See you out on the trail.